The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Powell, for being with us today. The end is in sight. I would like to begin by highlighting an issue that has been a concern for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and others. I know that the chairman has suggested that we're going to weave in the diversity and inclusion issues throughout our hearings, so here goes my concern. There has never been a Latino Federal Reserve president. And further, only about 5% of the Federal Reserve's overall workforce identifies as Hispanic or Latino. As we know, over the past year or so, there have been several presidential vacancies at the Federal Reserve banks, and there has still been consistent failure to appoint a Latino candidate. Chair Powell, are you aware of this trend, and do you agree that it's a problem that our diversity and inclusion numbers are in the Federal Reserve Board are not reflective of the Latino population?
Yes, it's something we've been focusing on.
All right, and can we get a commitment from you that you'll work on the workforce issues internally?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And I'd like to now follow up a little bit on some of the questions from Representative Norman, because I too have a concern about housing costs, particularly as it relates to equity and the negative impact on minority communities. I think you said in your paper that activity in the housing sector continues to weaken, largely reflecting higher mortgage rates. As he mentioned, the rates are higher, not only impacting single-family housing, but multifamily housing, and it's also becoming even more and more difficult for people in my district, which is 77% Latino, to be able to buy their first home buyer, the workforce, entry-level kind of housing. As financing homes get harder, as mortgage to find and mortgage rates rise, the population of home buyers is skewing towards older, wealthier, and whiter communities. In many cases, in our suburbs, equity firms are buying out the housing stock. Chair Powell, can you please speak about the relationship between Federal Reserve interest rate hikes and housing inequity, and what needs to change here?
Well, what needs to change is we need to get inflation under control so that interest rates can come back down. In the meantime, they're high because inflation is hurting all of your constituents, not just the housing sector, and all of everybody's constituents. And it's our job under the law to restore price stability and also to keep maximum employment.
Is there anything else that Congress can be doing in this respect?
That would be up to Congress, but there are lots of ways in which Congress can support people in various ways. But that's really in your hands.
Right. Now I want to move on into the numbers that you mentioned again in your remarks at page 2. You mentioned that of course, we all know there's been a record historic unemployment rate. It's down now to 3.4%, the lowest, I believe, in history, and thank you, Mr. President, for that. But you also mentioned that there's 1.9 job openings for each unemployed individual. I wondered if you could tell me how you define unemployed individual. What does the unemployed individual profile look like?
So that has a very specific meaning. It's someone who is not working but is actively seeking a job. So for example, if you take 6 months off and stop looking for a job, you're no longer unemployed. So that means there's a group of people who are kind of around the edges of the labor force who don't count as unemployed, and those people are marginally attached to the labor force, that kind of thing. But to be actually unemployed, you've got to be looking actively for work in the statistics.
Right, so it does not include people who are perhaps disabled and cannot find accommodations in the workplace to be able to get a job.
Unless they're looking for it. The test is whether you're actively looking, I think, in the last 4
Actively looking regardless of, age,
That's right.
whether or not they're...
It's not a value judgment, it's the way we assess unemployment. We look at the other groups too, but actual unemployment is...
How do you factor in the people that actually are on unemployment insurance?
Sorry?
How do you factor in the people who are on unemployment insurance?
Well, they're unemployed. They've got to be, by definition, we count them as unemployed, or they wouldn't qualify under the state requirements.
All right. Well, I just want to make sure that we clearly understand that that there's children, there's people that are older, people that are disabled, people that can't find daycare. There's so many other reasons why someone is unemployed.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I yield back.